Arjun had always been the quiet one in class, the kind of student who didn't talk much, didn't hang around in big friend groups, and never tried to grab attention. While most college students enjoyed long breaks, endless group chats, and late-night cafe runs, Arjun preferred the sound of small wires clicking, the hum of a soldering iron, and the soft flicker of an old lamp over his desk. His hostel room was different from everyone else's. No posters, no gaming consoles, no clutter of books scattered around. Just a small workbench in the corner, covered in tiny electronic parts, half-built circuits, and a notebook filled with messy calculations. He was studying electrical engineering at a well-known college, though few people even knew his name. Most of his classmates just called him the quiet guy. He didn't mind it. Talking had never been his strength, but thinking, that was where he shined. Every idea that came into his head felt like a puzzle waiting to be solved. He didn't care about grades or showing off in class. What excited him was creating something real, something that worked. Arjun's fascination with machines began when he was a child. He grew up in a small town where his father ran a small electronics repair shop. His father wasn't rich, but he had magic in his hands and he could fix anything. Radios, fans, old cassette players, and everything came back to life after his touch. Arjun used to sit beside him for hours, silently watching how he took apart broken gadgets and carefully put them back together. He remembered once asking, "How do you know what's wrong with it?" His father had smiled and said, "The machine tells you, son. You just have to listen carefully." Those words stayed with him forever. By the time Arjun reached college, his curiosity had only grown deeper. He was fascinated by how technology could solve real-life problems. Yet in a class full of competitive students focused on marks and placements, he often felt invisible. He wasn't the one answering questions loudly or impressing professors with fancy presentations. He was the one sitting quietly in the back taking notes, sketching designs in the margins of his notebook, and thinking far beyond what was being taught. One crisp Monday morning, their professor, Dr. Mehta, walked into class with a broad smile. He was one of those rare teachers who genuinely loved teaching. "All right, everyone," he began, placing his bag on the table. "Your next assignment is a bit different this time." The students looked up, curious. "You all have to build something. A simple electronic device that can solve one everyday human problem. It doesn't have to be complicated, but it must be practical." The room buzzed with chatter. Some students immediately began discussing ideas: automatic lights, smart alarm systems, or motion detectors. A few sighed in relief, thinking it would be an easy project to pass the semester, but at the back of the class, Arjun sat quietly, lost in thought. The idea of solving a human problem stirred something inside him. It wasn't just another assignment for him. It felt like a chance to create something meaningful. That evening, as others relaxed in the hostel courtyard, Arjun sat by his window, looking out at the dim lights of the city. He thought about what problem he wanted to solve. His mind wandered to his family, his childhood, and then to his cousin Ravi, a boy just 2 years younger than him who was born deaf and mute. Arjun remembered how Ravi struggled to communicate, how people often misunderstood him, and how frustrated he would get when others couldn't understand his sign language. Arjun had always wished there was some way to make that communication easier, and that's when the idea came to him. What if he could make a device that translated sign language into spoken words? A small gadget that could speak for those who couldn't. His heart began to race with excitement. It sounded impossible, but he couldn't shake off the thought. Maybe this was his chance. The next day in class, everyone was sharing their project ideas. Some sounded practical, others funny, but when it was Arjun's turn, the room grew quiet. He stood up, holding his small notebook, his voice soft but clear. "I want to make a wearable device," he said, "that can read hand movements, like sign language, and convert them into speech." There was a brief silence. Then a few chuckles. One student whispered, "That's impossible." Another said, "Dude, this isn't NASA." Even Dr. Mehta looked unsure for a moment. "That's ambitious, Arjun," he said kindly. "Are you sure you want to take on something that complex? Maybe start with something simpler?" But Arjun nodded. "I want to try, sir," he replied. His voice trembled a little, but his eyes were steady. After class, his lab partner, Rohit, caught up with him. "Bro, why did you say that? You know how hard that is, right? Everyone's doing something simple. Why do you always make things difficult for yourself?" Arjun smiled faintly. Because if I don't try, I'll never know if it could work. That night, Arjun began his research. He read everything he could find about motion sensors, accelerometers, and microcontrollers. He watched videos of prototypes, read blogs by tech students, and filled pages with ideas. His notebook turned into a map of circuits, code snippets, and notes in messy handwriting. The more he studied, the more determined he became. But with determination came frustration. The college lab didn't have half the components he needed. The equipment was outdated and the computers crashed often. He didn't have the money to buy expensive sensors or parts. Still, he refused to give up. He started scavenging broken electronics from the lab's junk cupboard. Old mobile parts, discarded sensors, damaged Arduino boards. Anything that could be reused. Days turned into weeks. His classmates often saw him sitting alone in the lab long after lectures ended, soldering wires or testing circuits under the dim lab light. Some made jokes about him, others simply ignored him. But none of it mattered. In those silent hours, surrounded by wires and resistance values, Arjun felt more alive than ever. Sometimes, though, doubt crept in. He would stare at the mess on his table and wonder if he was being foolish. What if everyone was right? What if this project was too big for a college student like him? What if it failed completely? But then he would think of his cousin, of the look in Ravi's eyes when he tried to speak but couldn't. And suddenly, the doubts would fade. He wasn't just building a project. He was building hope. One evening, as he worked late in the lab, Dr. Mehta walked in. He noticed Arjun sitting alone, surrounded by circuit boards and wires. "Still working, Arjun?" the professor asked softly. Arjun nodded, embarrassed. "Yes, sir. Just trying to fix a few sensor errors." Dr. Mehta smiled. "You remind me of myself at your age," he said. "Always trying to build something bigger than what the syllabus asked for. Don't lose that." He placed his hand on Arjun's shoulder. "Innovation doesn't come from comfort. It comes from courage. Keep going." That night, Arjun didn't sleep. He worked until sunrise, fixing connections, testing readings, and sketching new code. When his friends walked in the next morning, they found him asleep on the lab table, a faint smile on his face, his hand still holding a soldering iron. He didn't know if his idea would work. He didn't know if his device would ever speak the words his cousin couldn't. But deep down, he knew one thing for sure. He was going to try until he did. And that quiet determination, buried under his shy smile and soft voice, was something far stronger than anyone around him realized. The next morning, Arjun woke up to the sound of students rushing into the lab. His back ached from sleeping on the hard wooden stool and his eyes felt heavy, but his heart was calm. He looked at the half-built prototype on the table, a small circuit board connected to thin wires and sensors taped around a glove. It looked messy, unfinished, but it was a start. He had managed to make the sensors detect hand movement, but the readings were unstable. Every time he tried to translate the gestures into digital signals, the system either crashed or gave wrong outputs. It was frustrating, but he reminded himself that every failure was one step closer to success. Over the next few days, Arjun became a familiar sight in the college lab. Whether it was morning or late at night, he was always there, either testing, coding, or repairing. The janitor who cleaned the lab every evening even started leaving the lights on for him, saying with a grin, "You'll probably be here till morning again, won't you?" Arjun would just smile politely and nod. Meanwhile, his classmates continued to move on with their projects. Rohit and his group built an automatic sanitizer dispenser. Another team worked on a rain-sensing wiper system. Simple, smart, and easy to demonstrate. Everyone seemed relaxed except Arjun. For him, every day felt like a race against his own limits. One afternoon, during a short break, Arjun was sitting outside the campus cafe, staring blankly at a notebook filled with error logs. A few students nearby were chatting loudly about their projects. "You heard about Arjun?" one of them said. "He's still trying to make that glove thing talk or something." They laughed. "Man, some people just don't know when to quit." Arjun didn't react. He simply closed his notebook and looked at the sky. He was used to people not understanding him. Ever since childhood, his quiet nature had made him seem strange to others. But deep down, he wasn't trying to impress anyone. He just wanted to make something that mattered. Later that evening, Arjun video called his cousin Ravi. The screen flickered as the call connected. Ravi's cheerful face appeared, his hands moving quickly as he signed a hello. Arjun smiled warmly and signed back. Then he placed his hand over the half-finished device and said, "I'm making this for you." Ravi tilted his head, not fully understanding. Arjun mimed typing on a keyboard, then gestured to his mouth, pretending to speak. Ravi's eyes widened. He signed back excitedly, asking if it was real. Arjun nodded. He didn't need to say anything more. Ravi's smile gave him all the motivation he needed. The following week, Arjun spent every spare minute in the lab. He began working on a basic algorithm that could read motion patterns from the glove sensors. Each gesture produced a unique signal, and his goal was to link each one to a corresponding word. It was like teaching the computer to understand sign language, but it wasn't easy. The sensors often produced noisy data. The wires loosened frequently, and sometimes the code froze for no reason. Arjun's old laptop barely kept up with the processing. He even had to cool it down by placing a small fan beside it. One night, as he was trying to fix an error, he realized his power bank was dead, and there was a power cut in the hostel. Instead of giving up, he took his project to the college corridor where an emergency light glowed faintly. Sitting on the floor, he continued typing lines of code, completely lost in his world. By now, even some professors had started noticing his dedication. Dr. Mehta occasionally dropped by to check on his progress. "How's it going, Arjun?" he'd ask kindly. Arjun would smile tiredly. "Slow, sir, but I think I'm getting closer." The professor would nod, sometimes leaving him small notes of encouragement like, "Every great idea starts as a messy sketch." A few days later, the class was invited to present mid-project updates. Each student was asked to share what they had achieved so far. Most of them came forward confidently, showing neat circuits and working demos. When it was Arjun's turn, he walked up with his glove, wires dangling slightly from one side. Some students laughed softly. Dr. Mehta gestured for silence. "Go ahead, Arjun." He connected the glove to his laptop and ran the code. On the screen, a small window appeared, displaying sensor readings and numbers. "This," he began nervously, "is the early stage of a sign language converter. It's not finished yet, but it can already detect hand movement patterns." He raised his hand and made a simple sign. The numbers changed rapidly on the screen, then froze into a steady pattern. "Each gesture produces a unique signal," he explained. "Once I map them properly, I can make the system say the corresponding word through a speaker." The class went silent. For a few seconds, no one said anything. Then a hand rose from the back, and one of his classmates asked, "But what's the point? You really think this will work in real life?" Another laughed quietly. Arjun took a deep breath. "I don't know yet," he said honestly, "but I'm trying to make it possible." Dr. Mehta nodded approvingly. "That's the spirit of engineering, everyone. To try, to create. Not everything works the first time, but that doesn't mean it's worthless." Arjun looked at him with gratitude. For the first time in weeks, he felt seen. After the presentation, a few students came to him out of curiosity. One asked how the sensors worked. Another offered to help him with the coding part. It wasn't much, but it showed that people were beginning to notice his effort. The following weekend, Arjun stayed back on campus instead of going home. He had one goal, and to make the first prototype functional. He spent hours optimizing the sensor readings and reducing interference. He learned that by adding a small filter to the input data, he could make the motion tracking more accurate. Slowly, things started coming together. One night, while testing, he noticed something incredible. When he made a specific hand gesture, the sign for hello, his code successfully converted the sensor output into the text hello on his screen. For a moment, he just stared at it in disbelief. Then he tried again. The result was the same. The code worked. He couldn't stop smiling. It wasn't perfect, and it definitely couldn't speak yet, but it was progress. Real, measurable progress. He immediately sent a video clip to Dr. Mehta with a simple message. "Sir, it's working." The next day, Dr. Mehta met him in the lab. "This is amazing, Arjun," he said, examining the prototype. "You've gone further than I expected." Arjun looked down shyly. "It's still very basic, sir. It only detects one gesture properly." The professor chuckled. "Every invention starts small. Don't underestimate this moment." Encouraged by the progress, Arjun worked harder than ever. He added a small voice module to the circuit, allowing the computer to speak the detected word. It wasn't smooth. The robotic voice sounded rough and delayed, But when he heard that first mechanical hello come out of the speaker, he froze. The sound echoed softly in the lab, and for a brief moment he imagined his cousin hearing his own hands speak. His throat tightened with emotion. He recorded the video and sent it to Ravi. Within minutes, Ravi called back, signing excitedly, unable to stop smiling. Arjun laughed through tired eyes, watching his cousin's joy. That alone made every sleepless night worth it, but the journey was far from over. He still had to train the system for more gestures, fix the timing delays, and make the hardware stable enough to demonstrate. The final project presentation was only 3 weeks away. The pressure was immense. Some nights he barely ate or slept, surviving on coffee and biscuits. Yet despite the exhaustion, he felt alive. He was creating something with purpose. One evening, as he was adjusting the sensors, his lab partner Rohit walked in. "You're still here?" he asked. Arjun nodded without looking up. Rohit watched for a while, then said softly, "Hey, I was wrong, man. This is actually really something. Need help?" Arjun looked up and smiled. "Yeah, maybe you can test some gestures for me." From that day, Rohit started helping him after classes. Together, they refined the gesture detection, debugged code, and improved the voice response. Slowly, the device began to take shape. The whispers of doubt that once filled the classroom started fading. People who used to laugh at him now peeked curiously into the lab to see how far he'd come. For Arjun, it wasn't about fame or grades anymore. It was about seeing an idea, a wild, impossible dream, slowly turning real in his hands. And as he watched the tiny lights on his circuit blink, he whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." The morning of the presentation felt heavier than usual. The sky outside was still gray when Arjun woke up, his heart pounding. He hadn't slept much, maybe just 2 hours at most. The final touches on his device had taken all night. Now it was ready, sitting on his desk like a fragile dream made real. The glove, covered with thin black fabric, had tiny sensors stitched carefully at each finger joint. A small circuit board was attached near the wrist, connected to a mini speaker. It looked rough, handmade, but to Arjun it was beautiful. He sat quietly, holding the glove in his hands. The room was silent except for the faint hum of a fan. His roommate, still asleep, had no idea what Arjun had been working on for months. As he looked down at the glove, memories flooded his mind. The countless failures, the nights spent in front of a flickering screen, the times he'd almost given up. He thought about his cousin Ravi, about the first robotic hello that had come out of the speaker, and how Ravi's face had lit up with joy. That image gave him strength. By the time he reached the college hall, students were already setting up their projects. The air was thick with nervous excitement. Tables were arranged neatly in rows, each one displaying circuits, sensors, and posters. Professors and a few invited guests walked around taking notes. Laughter and chatter filled the room. But for Arjun, everything seemed distant, like the world had gone quiet around him. Rohit met him at the entrance, carrying a laptop bag. "You ready?" he asked with a smile. Arjun nodded, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. They set up their station near the corner, away from the noise. Arjun carefully laid the glove on the table, connected it to his laptop, and double-checked the wires. The system booted up slowly, showing the familiar code window. Everything seemed fine, for now. As the event began, one by one, students presented their projects. Automatic fans, smart streetlights, Bluetooth-controlled cars. The crowd clapped after each demonstration. The judges moved along, nodding politely, writing short comments. Arjun's turn was scheduled near the end. As the line grew shorter, his stomach twisted in knots. His palms were sweaty and he kept wiping them on his jeans. Rohit noticed and whispered, "Relax, man. You've got this." Finally, it was their turn. The hall grew quieter as the judges approached. A few students leaned closer out of curiosity. Dr. Mehta stood nearby, watching silently. Arjun took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began softly. His voice shook slightly at first, but he steadied it. "I'm Arjun, and this is a wearable communication device designed to help people who cannot speak, especially those who use sign language." The judges looked intrigued. One of them leaned forward. "How does it work?" Arjun nodded, putting on the glove. The device uses motion sensors and a small processing unit to detect hand gestures. Each gesture is linked to a specific word. The system then converts that gesture into speech output through this speaker. He raised his hand, making the sign for hello. For a second, nothing happened. His heart skipped a beat. He quickly checked the cable connection. One wire had loosened. Rohit noticed too and fixed it silently. Arjun tried again. This time the small speaker crackled and a mechanical voice said, "Hello?" The sound wasn't loud, but it was clear. The entire class froze for a second. The silence that followed felt endless. Then murmurs began spreading through the crowd. "Did that just talk?" Someone whispered. Arjun continued, his confidence slowly growing. He made another gesture and the sign for thank you. The device responded again, "Thank you." This time there was no doubt. It worked, the audience gasped. Some students who had mocked him earlier now stared in disbelief. A few even clapped softly. The judges leaned closer, visibly impressed. "That's remarkable," one of them said. "How did you manage to build this on your own?" Arjun smiled faintly. "With a lot of trial and error, sir. And a lot of late nights." The hall erupted in gentle laughter. Encouraged, he continued demonstrating. He explained how the sensors captured motion data, how the algorithm processed the signals, and how he had trained it to recognize specific patterns. The judges kept asking questions, and Arjun answered each one patiently. He was no longer the shy, quiet student everyone ignored. He was now the center of the room, speaking passionately about his creation. When he finally removed the glove, the room broke into applause. Not the polite, routine kind, and this was real, heartfelt appreciation. Students stood up, clapping loudly. Even Dr. Mehta, who had been watching quietly, looked emotional. For a moment, Arjun just stood there, overwhelmed. He had imagined this moment countless times during his sleepless nights, but the reality felt far greater. The same people who once laughed at him were now cheering. The same classroom that once felt like a lonely battlefield was now filled with admiration. After the applause settled, one of the judges, a guest engineer from a local tech company, stepped forward. "Young man," he said warmly, "you've done something truly innovative. Have you thought about what comes next for this project?" Arjun hesitated. I just wanted to make something useful," he said honestly. "If it can help even one person, that's enough for me." The judge smiled. "That's the right answer. But trust me, with some refinement, this could go far. You should think about developing it further. Maybe even applying for a patent." Those words left Arjun speechless. A patent? For something he had built from scrap parts and sleepless nights? He could hardly believe it. After the judges moved on to the next table, his classmates gathered around him. Some congratulated him warmly, while others just looked stunned. Rohit patted his back. "I told you," he said, grinning. "You'd leave everyone speechless." Dr. Mehta walked up to him last. His eyes glistened with pride. "Arjun," he said softly, "what you did today is more than a project. It's proof that real engineering comes from empathy, not just intelligence." Arjun felt his throat tighten. "Thank you, sir," he managed to say. "If you hadn't encouraged me, I might have given up." The professor shook his head gently. "No, Arjun, you didn't give up. That's what makes you special. Remember this day. The world needs more minds like yours." Later that evening, after the event ended, Arjun sat alone in the now empty lab. The applause still echoed faintly in his mind. His project sat on the table. The same messy glove that had once drawn laughter now looked like a symbol of belief. He picked it up carefully, running his fingers over the rough stitches. For the first time, he didn't see the imperfections. He saw potential. He took out his phone and recorded a short video message for Ravi. "It worked," he said, holding up the glove. It actually spoke. He smiled as he hit send. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. It was a video call. Ravi appeared on the screen, his hands moving rapidly with excitement. Arjun laughed, watching his cousin's pure joy. He slipped on the glove and made the sign for hello. The device spoke the word again, and Ravi clapped his hands in delight, laughing silently. That small exchange, on that one word, made every struggle worth it. When Arjun finally walked out of the building that night, the campus was quiet. The sky was filled with stars, and a soft breeze brushed against his face. He took a deep breath, smiling to himself. For the first time, he felt seen, not as the quiet boy in the corner, not as the student who never spoke, but as someone who had created something that could make a difference. He didn't know what the future would bring. Maybe the project would get noticed. Maybe it wouldn't. But that didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that he had done it. He had turned an impossible idea into something real. As he walked back to his hostel under the night sky, his tired eyes glowed with quiet pride. Behind him, the lab lights flickered off, but inside his heart, something brighter had just begun to shine. A week after the presentation, the college corridors still buzzed with Arjun's name. It was strange. For years, he had walked through those same hallways unnoticed, just another quiet student blending into the crowd. But now people stopped to greet him. Some congratulated him. Others simply looked at him with quiet respect. For the first time, Arjun felt seen, not for being the loudest or the smartest, but for believing in something no one else did. The project exhibition had officially ended, but its impact hadn't. Dr. Mehta had sent a report and video of Arjun's presentation to the college dean, who was deeply impressed. A few days later, the dean called Arjun to his office. Nervous, Arjun entered, clutching his old backpack, unsure of what to expect. The dean smiled warmly. "You're the student who built that sign language device, right?" "Yes, sir," Arjun said quietly. "I watched your video," the dean said, leaning back in his chair. "Remarkable work. Do you realize what this could mean for people who can't speak or hear? You've created something that connects two worlds." Arjun's cheeks flushed. "Thank you, sir. I still have a lot to improve. It's just a basic prototype." "That's how every great invention starts," the dean said. "I've spoken to a local news channel. They want to interview you and feature your project on their weekly Young Innovators program." For a moment, Arjun thought he had misheard. "Interview me?" he repeated, his voice uncertain. The dean laughed softly. "Yes, you. Don't worry, they're coming tomorrow. Just be yourself." That night, Arjun could barely sleep. He wasn't nervous about cameras or questions. He just couldn't believe everything that was happening. A few months ago, he was struggling alone in a dim lab, wondering if anyone would ever care about his work. Now people actually wanted to hear his story. The next day, the small news crew arrived on campus. They set up cameras in the electronics lab where Arjun demonstrated his glove again. The reporter, a cheerful young woman, asked him how it all began. "It started as a college project," Arjun explained, his voice steady but humble. "But the idea came from my cousin. He can't speak or hear, and I always wanted to make it easier for him to communicate. I didn't have fancy tools or money, just some old sensors, parts from discarded gadgets, and help from my professor." The reporter smiled. "And now you've made something that could change lives." Arjun hesitated, then said softly, "I just wanted to make something useful. If this helps even one person, that's enough." The interview aired 2 days later, and the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from people across the city, some parents of children with hearing disabilities, others from teachers who worked in special schools. Everyone wanted to know more about the device. Many expressed hope, saying they had been waiting for something like this for years. For Arjun, it was surreal. He had never thought something he built with scrap materials could touch so many lives. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. Even his classmates sent him screenshots of the news segment writing, "You did it, bro," and "Proud of you, man." But the most meaningful message came from home. His father called that evening, his voice trembling slightly. "I saw you on TV, Beta," he said. "Your mother couldn't stop crying. You made us proud." Arjun smiled, his eyes moist. "I just fixed a few wires, Papa. You're the one who taught me how." His father chuckled. "Maybe, but you went further than I ever did." "I'm proud of you, son." Soon, local newspapers picked up the story. Headlines read, "College student builds low-cost device to give voice to the voiceless." A few weeks later, Arjun received an email from a small tech startup that focused on assistive technologies. They wanted to meet him. When he entered their office, a modest workspace filled with young engineers, he felt strangely at home. The company's founder, a woman named Priya, greeted him warmly. "We saw your interview," she said. "Your idea has real potential. We've been working on something similar, but your approach is simpler and more affordable. Would you be interested in collaborating?" Arjun was stunned. "You mean, actually develop it?" Priya nodded. "Yes. With proper funding and hardware support, this could reach hospitals, schools, and families who need it. You've already built the heart of it. We can help you build the rest." It was the kind of opportunity he had never imagined. Within a few months, Arjun began working with their team after college hours. Together, they refined the design, made the glove smaller, faster, and more accurate. They even replaced the wires with wireless sensors and added Bluetooth connectivity so the device could connect to smartphones. Every day felt like a new discovery. For Arjun, the lab wasn't just a workplace anymore. It was a dream taking shape. He often thought about how a simple class project had led him here. He still remembered the first night he tested the prototype, sitting alone under that dim emergency light. The memory always reminded him that great things start in small, quiet moments. Meanwhile, his college recognized his achievement officially. During the annual convocation ceremony, Arjun was invited on stage to receive a special Innovation Award. The auditorium was packed with students, teachers, and families. As he walked up to the stage, the entire hall stood and clapped. Dr. Mehta, who had guided him from the beginning, was waiting at the podium. When Arjun reached him, the professor smiled proudly. "You've made us all proud, Arjun," he said, handing him the trophy. "You've shown everyone that true innovation doesn't come from fancy labs or big budgets. It comes from a heart that wants to help." The applause that followed felt endless. Arjun stood there, the lights bright on his face, his eyes scanning the crowd. For a moment he remembered how it had all begun. Just a quiet boy sitting at the back of the class with an idea no one believed in. And now, that same idea had brought him to this stage. After the ceremony, students rushed to take pictures with him. Some asked for advice on their own projects. "How do you stay motivated?" one asked. Arjun thought for a moment and replied simply, "By remembering why you started. If your reason is strong, you'll never run out of energy." A few months later, his improved version of the device, now named VoiceLink, was officially launched through the startup's platform. It wasn't perfect yet, but it worked reliably. Schools for hearing-impaired students began testing it. Videos of teachers using the device with children went viral online, touching thousands of hearts. One evening, Arjun received a message from a mother who wrote, "My son used your glove today to say I love you to me for the first time. Thank you." He read that message over and over, tears welling in his eyes. No award, no recognition could ever match that feeling. As months passed, Arjun's life changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. He began speaking at seminars, sharing his journey with young students who once thought innovation was only for the rich or the genius. He always told them, "You don't need perfect tools to build something amazing. You just need to care deeply enough to start." And every time he said those words, he meant them because he had lived them. Sometimes, when he visited his hometown, he would stop by his father's small electronics shop. The smell of solder and burnt wires still filled the air. His father would look up from a half-fixed radio and smile. "Still working with wires, I see," he'd joke. Arjun would laugh, sitting beside him, watching him work, just like he used to as a boy. "Still listening to what the machines are trying to say," Arjun would reply. Late at night, after the day's noise faded, Arjun often sat by his window, looking at the stars. His invention had grown beyond what he'd ever dreamed. But deep inside, he still felt like that same quiet student, sitting in the back of the classroom, dreaming of building something that mattered. He had learned something powerful, that true innovation doesn't always begin with brilliance. Sometimes it begins with empathy, and when passion is guided by purpose, even a small college project can become a voice for the voiceless. As he closed his eyes, he thought of Ravi again, his cousin who had unknowingly inspired it all. The glove now lay beside his bed, upgraded, sleek, and polished, a reminder of where it all began. He smiled softly, whispering to himself, "We did it, Ravi. We really did." And somewhere in that quiet room, filled with memories, wires, and dreams, a soft voice from the device spoke the same word it had spoken on that unforgettable day. "Hello." Months passed, and the world around Arjun kept changing faster than he could have ever imagined. What started as a small class project had grown into something far bigger than him, a real movement of kindness, innovation, and hope. The device, VoiceLink, was no longer just an experiment. It had become a bridge between people who had been separated by silence for years. Special schools began to use it in daily lessons. Hospitals adopted it for patients who couldn't speak after surgeries. NGOs started campaigns to make it available in rural areas. Everywhere Arjun looked, he saw stories of connection. A mother understanding her child's sign for the first time. A student finally being able to answer in class. A grandfather saying thank you after years of silence. Each story touched him deeply. It was humbling, almost unbelievable, that a project born in a small college lab could carry so much emotion, so much meaning. But with recognition came responsibility. Arjun was invited to conferences, summits, and exhibitions. Reporters wanted quotes. Students wanted guidance. Investors wanted meetings. Life suddenly became a blur of events and emails. Yet no matter how busy things got, Arjun never lost his simplicity. He still preferred quiet corners, tinkering with wires, or sketching ideas in his old notebook. The same one with coffee stains and uneven pages that had seen the birth of his first design. One morning, he got an invitation that left him speechless. An international technology summit in Singapore had selected VoiceLink as one of the top 10 innovations of the year. His expenses were covered, and he was asked to present on stage in front of global scientists and investors. Arjun couldn't believe it. He showed the letter to Dr. Mehta, who smiled with pride. "See, I told you this would go far," he said. "You didn't just build a device, Arjun. You built a story, one the world wants to hear." When the day finally arrived, Arjun stood backstage, holding the sleek version of VoiceLink in his hand. The hall was massive, filled with hundreds of people, some of the brightest minds from around the world. He had never been in such a place before. His heart raced. For a moment, the same nervousness from that classroom years ago returned. The shaking hands, the doubt, the thought that maybe he wasn't good enough to be here. Then he remembered his cousin Ravi's face, the first smile when the glove had spoken, "Hello." That single memory steadied him. He took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, the audience silent. He began to speak, his voice calm and sincere. "I was just a college student who wanted to help someone I love," he said. "I didn't have money or a lab, just an idea and a reason to keep going. I built this device using old parts and sleepless nights, and it ended up giving a voice to those who never had one." He demonstrated VoiceLink, showing how simple gestures could instantly translate into clear speech. The hall erupted in applause. But more than the innovation itself, it was his honesty and humility that moved people. When he stepped off the stage, people from different countries came to meet him. Engineers, teachers, parents. Many shared their own stories, telling him how they dreamed of making life easier for someone too. Arjun realized something important that day. True innovation doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who dares to care. A few weeks later, VoiceLink received international support and funding. It was redesigned into smaller, cheaper versions available in different languages. It reached communities in India, Africa, and Southeast Asia, places where such technology was needed most. News outlets called him the quiet inventor who spoke through his creation. But fame didn't change him. He still returned to his college every few months, visiting the same lab, helping students with their ideas, guiding them through the same struggles he once faced. One afternoon, while Arjun was conducting a small workshop, a group of students gathered around him, full of excitement. "Sir," one of them asked, "how did you know your idea was worth it? How did you not give up?" Arjun smiled, thinking for a moment. "I didn't know," he said. "I just believed it mattered. Sometimes it's not about knowing. It's about trusting that even small efforts can lead to something bigger than you imagine." The students nodded, inspired. And in their eyes, Arjun saw the same spark he once had, that raw hunger to create something meaningful. Later that evening, as the sun set over the college courtyard, Arjun sat alone on a bench. He looked at the students laughing in groups, the sound of life echoing around him. It reminded him of how far he had come, from a quiet boy lost in his own ideas to someone who had touched lives across the world. His phone buzzed, a message from Ravi's mother. It was a short video. In it, Ravi was wearing VoiceLink, smiling wide. He waved his hands gently and the device translated, "I'm proud of you, brother." Arjun watched it again and again, his eyes wet with emotion. He whispered softly, "I'm proud of you too." That night, Arjun sat by his window once again like he used to in the old days. The city lights flickered in the distance, and the prototype glove rested on his desk, old, worn, but full of memories. He thought about how every great change starts small, in a single idea, a single choice to care, or a single dream that refuses to die. He realized that he didn't just invent a device. He invented hope, the kind that spreads quietly like light in darkness. In time, Arjun's story began to appear in textbooks, not as a tale of genius, but as proof that compassion could lead to creation. His journey became a reminder for thousands of young dreamers that no dream is too small when it's born out of love. Years later, even after his invention had become common, Arjun continued to visit small villages, teaching kids about technology, showing them how they too could build something meaningful. He never charged money, never sought attention. His only goal was to plant the same seed of belief that once grew inside him. And sometimes, late at night when everything was quiet, Arjun would turn on his device again. The small speaker would light up and he'd hear that gentle word that started it all. Hello. He'd smile every time. Because to him, that simple word meant much more now. It wasn't just a greeting. It was a symbol, the first bridge built between silence and sound, between doubt and belief, between a dream and the world. And as he closed his eyes, with the soft hum of the city outside, Arjun felt peace, knowing that even the smallest voice, when built with heart, can echo across the world, forever. Years had passed since that unforgettable day when Arjun's invention had first spoken the word hello. The world had changed a lot since then. Technologies had evolved. New devices had come and gone, but one story still lived on, quietly inspiring millions, the story of a shy college student who turned empathy into innovation. Now in his early 30s, Arjun was no longer a student. He had become a mentor, a guide, and a quiet force of change in the world of assistive technology. But despite the success, he still lived a simple life. He preferred small offices over fancy buildings, and he still carried his old backpack, stitched at the corners wherever he went. He often said, "This bag carried my dream once. I'll never leave it behind." His invention, VoiceLink, had now been improved and distributed in over 20 countries. The device had transformed into a wristband, smaller than a watch, with advanced AI that could learn each user's unique sign patterns. It connected to phones, translated gestures in real time, and even supported multiple languages. But to Arjun, the technology wasn't the highlight. The people were. He kept receiving letters and emails from those who had used his invention. Parents, teachers, children. Each message told a different story. Some shared how it gave their loved ones a new voice. Others said it brought families closer. There were even stories from schools in remote areas where children with hearing disabilities now attended classes confidently for the first time. Those messages became Arjun's treasure. He printed every single one and kept them in a wooden box beside his desk. Whenever he felt tired or uncertain, he'd open the box, read a few letters, and remind himself why he started. One afternoon, while working in his small office, Arjun received an email from a young girl named Meera. She was only 13 and studying in a small town in India. The message was simple but powerful. "Dear Arjun, sir, I can speak now with my friends because of your invention. Before, they didn't understand me. Now they call me the smartest girl in class. Thank you for giving me a voice." Arjun read it several times, his eyes misty. He replied personally, "Dear Meera, you were never voiceless. You always had it. The world just needed a way to listen. Keep shining." That night, as he looked outside the window, he realized something profound. It wasn't just about helping people speak. It was about making them feel heard. That was what truly mattered. A few weeks later, Arjun received another invitation, this time from an international humanitarian organization that wanted to award him for his contribution to inclusive communication. The event was to be held in Geneva. When he arrived, he saw people from all walks of life, innovators, educators, activists. The hall was grand, filled with bright lights and cameras. But when Arjun went on stage to receive the award, he didn't talk about his success. Instead, he spoke about his struggles. "I wasn't a genius," he said, his tone soft and heartfelt. "I was just someone who refused to give up on a small idea. I learned that invention isn't about building machines, it's about building understanding. The moment we create something that connects two hearts, we've already succeeded." The hall erupted in applause. People stood up, some with tears in their eyes. And in that moment, Arjun realized that the most powerful sound in the world wasn't applause, it was gratitude. After the ceremony, as he was about to leave, a small boy approached him with his mother. The boy was wearing the latest version of VoiceLink. He raised his hand, moved his fingers, and the wristband spoke clearly. "Thank you, Arjun, uncle." Arjun knelt down, smiling warmly. "No," he said softly. "Thank you for proving it works." That encounter stayed with him for days. He often thought about how one small act of effort could ripple across time, touching lives he'd never meet. Years went by, and Arjun began teaching full-time at his old college. His classroom became a place where imagination came alive. His students weren't afraid to fail, because he always told them, every failure is just an idea wearing the wrong clothes. He encouraged them to dream beyond marks, grades and certificates, and to create for a reason, not recognition. His office walls were covered with photos of his students' projects, small robots, simple solar devices, medical sensors, all born from passion. One day, as he was grading papers, Dr. Mehta, now retired, walked into his office. His hair was white, his steps slower, but his eyes still had that spark of pride. "Arjun," he said, smiling, "I see you've finally taken my seat." Arjun stood and greeted him respectfully. "No one can take your place, sir." "You started my journey," Dr. Mehta chuckled, "and you've continued it beautifully. I'm proud of you. You've become what I always hoped my students would become. Not just engineers, but human beings who feel." They talked for hours, reminiscing about the past, the late nights in the lab, the first working prototype, the excitement of success. Before leaving, Dr. Mehta placed a hand on Arjun's shoulder and said, "Promise me something and never stop teaching. Because when you teach, your ideas multiply." Arjun kept that promise. Years later, when Dr. Mehta passed away, Arjun quietly dedicated a small innovation center in his name, a place where students could build anything they dreamed of, free of cost. On the wall, he engraved a simple quote, "Innovation is the language of kindness." That quote became the heart of everything Arjun did. By his 40s, VoiceLink had become a global tool, but Arjun never patented it fully for himself. Instead, he made its core design open source, free for anyone to improve, modify, or use. People called him foolish for giving away such a valuable invention, but he only smiled and said, "It was never mine to keep. It belonged to those who needed it," and that decision changed everything. Innovators around the world began developing cheaper, localized versions. Soon, children in remote areas who couldn't even afford smartphones had access to VoiceLink through basic versions made with low-cost materials. Arjun's name slowly became a symbol of compassion-driven innovation. He didn't chase fame. It followed him quietly, through every smile his invention created. One evening, after another long day of teaching, Arjun returned home and sat by his desk. The original prototype glove, worn out, faded, and patched with tape, still sat in a glass case beside his window. He picked it up gently, feeling the rough texture under his fingers. He remembered every moment, the fear, the failures, the laughter, the discovery, every emotion that had brought him here. Outside, the night was calm. The city lights glimmered softly. Arjun smiled, pressed the glove's old power switch, and heard the faint robotic voice say the word that started it all. "Hello?" He closed his eyes and whispered back, "Hello again, old friend." For him, that single word carried the entire story. Not of machines, but of people. Not of technology, but of connection. Not of invention, but of humanity. And somewhere, across the world, thousands of devices repeated that same word in different languages, each one carrying a piece of his dream forward. It was a quiet reminder that sometimes, the most powerful inventions don't just change how people live. They change how people understand each other. Arjun leaned back in his chair, his heart full of peace. He didn't need awards or fame anymore. His reward was already out there, living, breathing, and speaking through the voices he helped create. And as he watched the night fade into dawn, he smiled one last time, thinking, it all began with silence and ended with the world finally listening.